So I just biked to a place called Century City, which I would argue is one of the prettiest parts of Los Angeles. Now, don't get me wrong, if you go to UChicago, there's no shortage of pretty city sights. But today I'm not here to talk about Los Angeles, or Chicago really. I want to talk about some of the things you could do there, specifically RSOs. Now, what does RSO stand for? Well, the abbreviation RSO stands for Recognized Student Organization. It's basically a fancy way of saying a club. What most other schools will call a school club, UChicago will call an RSO. And so why would you join an RSO? Why do you have to? Well, you don't have to. But I think that, if you join an RSO, if you join like an organization at UChicago, that I really think it will give you some good real world experience. It'll help you gain certain skills, whether it be public speaking or knowledge in a certain field that you're interested in. It'll also help you make connections and get to know the students. So I definitely think that when it comes to RSOs, that the pros outweigh the cons. And, I want to say a couple things before I get started on this. One, I'll admit I'm not in that many RSOs. I'm really only in 4. And number 2, a lot of that was because of COVID. Over the past year, a lot of clubs have either been reduced and don't have the events that they've had before, or they've been shut down completely. And it's much harder to, have meetings in person or really coordinate anything now that everything is so virtual. And, some clubs such as, the outdoor activity club, they can't do anything because the entire premise of the club is based on meeting outside and meeting in person. But that being said, I definitely think that there are some RSOs that can still give you, a meaningful, nice experience even during COVID. And I want to shed light on a few that I'm part of and some of the things that I feel that I've gained out of these clubs, or sorry, not clubs, RSOs. So let's get into it. So let's start off by talking about the first club, the first RSO that I joined at the University of Chicago, Moot Court. Now, what is Moot Court? Well, Moot Court is essentially an imitation of the U.S. Supreme Court. It's a good way to sort of get more well-versed in, U.S. law, constitutional law, and basically how this whole system works. And it's very much simplified, but, just getting into it really gives you like a bit of insight into how these cases work. Now, there are a couple things that I really love about Moot Court. They give you enough competitions that you can practice, but they're also pretty... I love the fact that Moot Court is so heavily interactive. When you first enter the club, everyone's so welcoming, and there's a bunch of icebreakers. You really get to know the people on your team, even virtually. Even when you don't meet in person, you still get that experience. It also helps with things like your public speaking skills, how well versed you are in certain aspects of U.S. law, and also it's just a really great way to get your mind off of other things like classwork. And one thing that I really love about Moot Court is, and if you love either public speaking or debate, then definitely Moot Court would be a great place for you. And if you've ever been part of Model United Nations in high school, or if you've ever been part of a mock trial in high school, Moot Court sort of has the same spirit as that. It's a bit different because the nature of the types of laws and cases that you're dealing with are different, but the fundamental nature is the same. And in Moot Court, yes, of course the cases that you deal with are usually fictional, but the things that you cite when you make your arguments, when you prepare your speeches, everything that you cite is based off of real U.S. Supreme Court cases. And these allow you to be more aware of the kinds of, Supreme Court cases and the types of laws that have either been passed or denied in the past. and they really shed some insight on a different side of U.S. history. Normally when you like in a U.S. history class, normally you would learn more about the wars that have happened and the major laws and civil rights movements and all of that stuff that shapes our U.S. history. And I think that the Supreme Court cases and the significance they have, of course they'll mention it, it'll be sprinkled throughout the textbook, but at least in my experience, it's been very much glossed over, even though it's so important and so vital to everything that happens in this country. But I think that if you are involved in moot court, that you'll get a much broader, much better perspective on stuff like this. I think another benefit of joining moot court is that it's not a huge time commitment. You still have to commit enough time to memorize speeches or to remember important aspects of certain Supreme Court cases and all of that. You have to understand what you're doing in order to get into moot court. But it's not a huge time commitment in the sense that, meetings are once a week, sometimes twice a week right before a competition. Competitions typically only happen like once or twice a quarter. So generally, I would say if you want to find a pretty low to mid-level, if you want to find a mid-level commitment RSO where you want to commit enough time that you can actually get a good learning experience out of it and meet new people, but you also don't have the time to be involved in RSO every day, or you don't have the time to go to a competition every 2 weeks, I definitely think that moot court might be the place for you. But if Supreme Court law and the constitutional amendments, if that sort of topic is not in your alley, how about you try Amnesty International? So in my opinion, Amnesty International is one of the best RSOs you can join if you want to join something that is bigger than UChicago itself, because that's what Amnesty International literally is. It's not just a club at UChicago. Amnesty International is literally an international organization, that helps refugees, that helps people in environmental crises and political crises and all sorts of, dire situations. And, they've made a lot of effort to try to, help as many people as they can all around the world. And so if you want to be part of efforts like that, if you want to perhaps join a seminar where people talk about what it's like to work for Amnesty International as, a diplomat or as a spokesperson or as someone on the front lines, I think that would be a really great, RSO that you could be part of. And, the club right now is actually pretty small. We only have about 15 members. So, getting any extra people on board would actually be really helpful. So if you want to be part of something that's sort of bigger than UChicago itself, be part of, a bigger international effort, I think that Amnesty might be the place for you. Now, that being said, as much as I love Amnesty International and all the work that they do and all the lives that they've saved, there is one thing that I cannot stand about Amnesty International, and it's the way they talk. I've watched, and attended several seminars from people who work for Amnesty International and who are helping people in places like Syria and Afghanistan and wherever. And the one thing I always notice is that they use a lot of euphemisms. They try to tone down their language. So, for example, people from Al Qaeda or the Taliban or whoever, they never call them terrorists. They always call them unorganized, or no, sorry, not they would call them organized non-governmental bodies, or non-political parties, or whatever you want to call it, some sort of jargon that they use to try to prevent buzzwords like terrorism or violence or whatever. They always try to sugarcoat everything with the language that they use, and I hate that. And I actually said something about that in one of the seminars, interestingly enough. But this is something I could debate about all day. But speaking of debate, if Amnesty International is not the right place for you, then maybe you should consider joining the debate team. UChicago is quite well known for their debate team. And in fact, if you want to join a much bigger community, Amnesty International only has 15 members. If you want to join a club or an RSO with a huge amount of UChicago students, then debate might be the place for you. The debate team, especially if you did in high school. I personally never did it in high school, but now that I'm doing it at UChicago, I really enjoy it. Again, similar to Moot Court, if you really enjoy debating or public speaking, then the UChicago debate team might be the place for you. I'm personally in a department called Parley Debate, so basically parliamentary debate, and it's much like in high school where you're given a topic and you have like a very short amount of time to prepare and research and set up your arguments, and then you sort of list them in sort of a bullet point fashion. And I definitely think that when you go to UChicago, you'll meet plenty of people who are very skilled debaters, and I think that it really allows you to it makes it feel more competitive, but it also feels more fulfilling whenever you do a debate, whenever you join a tournament. And much like Moot Court as well, their competitions are only twice a quarter. They're not, they're pretty sporadic, and they do require some time commitment, but again, not the huge amount that would be required in several others. And there are many reasons why I ended up joining the RSOs that I did, but I definitely think that all of them have sort of a different purpose for me. I think that Moot Court allows me to get a better understanding of U.S. Supreme Court law, of national law in general. I definitely think that it allows me to, better understand U.S. history, and I think it's the best learning experience out of the three. Amnesty International to me is the most fulfilling because I feel like I'm part of a much bigger cause, and I want to be part of all these international efforts and maybe even work for Amnesty International someday. And then lastly, I would say that Parley Debate, or more generally the debate team at UChicago, I would say is the most fun out of the three because I personally really enjoy debating, and I think it's a really good way to sort of enhance your ability to make arguments and enhance your ability to speak. And just in general, I think that all three of them can serve really well. And I think that if you go to the University of Chicago, that joining any one of these three would really make your experience so worth it. So I wish you the best of luck, whether you go to UChicago or anywhere else, and I'll see you soon.